platforms. I think that just worked. Yes. Hello, hello. Welcome. Who's here? Rob. Awesome. Great to see you. I think that just yes. Hello, hello. Mute myself so I can, you don't have an echo. Okay. Welcome. Thanks for joining, everybody. Few people in Zoom, some people on the live stream, and I'm excited to just get a few things started here, talking about our DFIR training roadmap. Can you guys see my screen? Everybody able to hear me? Okay, all good. Thanks, guys. Cool. All right, we are live too on other platforms, so let's get this going. Thanks for joining in, and it's right before the holidays. So before people check out, I thought I might just share a few things that are hopefully interesting and help people to contemplate about upskilling and what to do maybe next year. And some, getting some thoughts going on training and how to just get, improve capabilities, processes, skills, everything that are needed in this capacity. So let me get started with kicking things off. This is going to be a release. I'm going to release the Blue Cape Security DFIR training roadmap in this talk today. So overall, most people of you probably know me. So we are going to have, just Zoom, and there's Q&As and ask questions. On other platforms, you should be able to get comments there as well. Yes, I can actually see people are live too. So ask questions. I try to see, to capture questions. If you have any, use the Q&A or comments. Join our Discord. Definitely, if you aren't there just yet, this is our platform where we are going to, add discussions, latest and greatest news on DFIR, threat intel, job postings. Of course, I'm adding every time I see something interesting and try to keep people posted, because I definitely want to encourage everyone to, find the places and everything that you need to know. Of course, and we also talk about trainings, courses, and labs, support. You get support there and everything. Now, other than that, yeah, just focus, right? It's really hard these days to listen to a Zoom and not having like 10 other tabs open, but hopefully this is something that is interesting to everybody and might be helpful. So yeah, let's just spend the next 30 minutes or so and talk about something hopefully very helpful. Now, we were going to introduce here a DFIR training mode roadmap that I have been developing or continuously developing over several years now. This is a roadmap that has helped a lot with upskilling with organizations that I have worked with, as well as with individuals. And it is a framework, basically, because a lot of people are always looking for how to do things, right? So it's a framework for how to develop skills, how to gain the knowledge, and basically implement strategies that are essential to excelling in a variety of cyber defense roles. It's not really just DFIR, because if you have your DFIR processes and skills down, then obviously a lot of other areas will benefit. So it's also for teams as well as individuals in roles such as typical SOC analysts, forensics practitioners, IR practitioners, or both. It depends on the organization, because those roles just are interchangeably defined and have huge overlaps. So sometimes it's a organization that has a few people that are doing everything. Sometimes it's a bigger organization with more structure and more well-defined roles and responsibilities. Security engineers, it helps a lot, of course. Engineering these days is becoming bigger and bigger in our area, where we need to understand more on the technical side of things. But it's also important for managers, right, to know how to go about this and what works. So just real quick, a quick background. I think most people, I see a lot of familiar names, so they might know about me. I'm Markus Schober. I run Blue Cape Security. I started Blue Cape Security about 2.5 years ago, which is an independent blue team training and consulting company. I've been doing workshops, courses, all individual trainings, consulting for organizations and individuals to help them upskill. And that just came basically with the experience that I've gained by working through at a principal DFIR consultant role, also running my own team there, having seen a lot of cases, incident response cases as a consultant in a lot of different environments. It's definitely been very helpful. And before that, my technical background was basically working as a security consultant and security orchestration startups that were acquired, as well as a software engineer. So that's kind of what led me into the security specialty roles. And lots of expired certs, of course. Now, the experience that specifically contributed to developing this framework is, like I mentioned, I've been involved in a lot of diverse DFIR engagements within large organizations, within large enterprise environments in the United States mostly, but lots of global engagements as well. And there used to be a bunch of APT threats that we dealt with, but at some point ransomware came up, and then it was just ransomware case over ransomware case for years, and it still keeps going. So lots of experience there, especially as a consultant, you get to see a lot of different organizations and how they work, what works, what doesn't work. Mostly for the ones that have been hit by ransomware, so things didn't work. So we needed to kind of lessons learned and improve things from there. And that also led to having developed a lot and implemented a bunch of incident response programs for large organizations. And that also led to designing and executing workshops and trainings, especially, even all the way up to cyber range training events, multi-day events where people were training in a safe environment, hands-on skills, processes, communication, and so on. As well as, of course, running workshops, courses, and even tabletop exercises, which I think can be really, really valuable as well, just as a starting point, bringing people together. So that's all the experience that went into this. Now, what are the current problems that we want to overcome? And again, every organization is different. Every person has different backgrounds, skills, and levels in their maturity at this point. But the most common issue is that you work in a traditional SOC, you have a lot of different platforms, environments, things just to be familiar with, right? You have data from EDR endpoints, you have network telemetry, you have to be familiar with identity providers and understand authentications and all these different kind of processes that are in place, maybe with third parties. Then you have emails, a lot of email, and then there's platforms that are in the cloud. There's platforms that are on-prem. There is so many applications these days that are hosted as a SaaS, software as a service, or somewhere else. And all this kind of data somewhere with identities and everything is coming together at some point into a traditional SIEM or some other platforms that you might be using to create detection rules, to respond to investigate potential events or incidents, ideally performing threat hunting, and then there might be some analysis, triage, and then at some point reporting, and then we start over and over again, and we're getting slammed with these events. And of course, if you're getting alert fatigue out of this, if there's too much that you can handle, there's a lack of oftentimes of experience, which also is the reason for that is often that we have a lack of career advancement opportunities, right? In the SOC, oftentimes people are hitting a ceiling by looking at the same things over and over again, but not really learning from anything new, because luckily for the organization, nothing new like major incidents are happening for the most part. Then you have, it's unclear where to develop, how to develop skills, how to just improve and advance your career overall. This is a typical problem I've seen a lot when I talk to analysts that are hitting the ceiling, have been doing triaging and SIMs and alerts for years, but where to go from now? You haven't done any ransomware cases, you can't do really consulting, but how do you go from there? That's a common problem I've heard from people that I've been working with. And then, of course, threat landscape evolving. I mean, this is a common phrase that you hear everywhere, but in some extent, it's also true. It's not just the techniques that they're using; it's more the different types of technologies, right? You need to be familiar with so many applications, with so many platforms. Like there's a vulnerability on one platform today, there's another one tomorrow, there's a different exploit that you might have to understand and fix another day. So there's so many things that you need to just understand. And then if you set up your own tools and environments, then oftentimes you have a variety of tools, and many times you're just pretty constrained in terms of budgets or in terms of technical capabilities and the time that you have to set up tools, the knowledge you have to set up those tools, and then especially the maintenance part, right? You might be setting up something fancy, shiny, new, have seen that many, many times, and then maintenance is just becoming a huge problem. And that's always a thing that just keeps happening, especially when you attempt to do automation. And that just basically is not helpful if you have not a very mature SOC environment where your capabilities are ineffective, right? If you're not don't have decent processes, if you don't have clear skills or experience and skills development path, and how to, how to work with tools, how to get the most out of things, that's not helpful. So this is a very traditional problem, common problem in traditional environments, but it's not getting much easier, right? There's a lot in the future that's coming at us. In this screenshot or this SOC overview visualization here, as you can see, this is from softwareanalyst.substack.com. They just released actually a really cool blog post about AI and how AI might augment SOC environments. This is their basic illustration of a SOC environment today. And we're not going to go too much into AI at this point, but just want to say this is a really fantastic resource to read up on the potential of it. But one more slide we have that I took from this report was, this is going to come up, and this is potentially something that we also need to be familiar with, right? If you think we're already kind of overwhelmed with what was happening before, some things will get easier, some things will get harder, because the future architecture of SOC environments might look something like that. It's basically, the goal is always the ability to detect, to prevent and respond to the bad stuff efficiently and effectively, right? So efficiently, basically with as minimal resources as possible, and effectively as quickly as possible. And there's so many more components that will play a role in the SOC environments, right? We have definitely more data sources or tools, right? Endpoint-based, network-based, identity, email, we already had that, and a bunch of stuff that's in the cloud. It's just going to generate even more data. So we need efficient processes that can kind of, process it. And so what we also have is external sources such as threat intel feeds, some additional data that is just used to correlate, detect, and enrich existing data. And that's then going to be happening all within this, storage, detection, and analytics layer. You still will have SIMs and probably a lot of stuff that will be augmented with AI there, automatically, like, searching, detecting things with more context. And this might be a good thing, but also we need to understand how it's going to happen and why. And it's going to use data from data lakes, from SIMs, from XDR platforms. We'll have a lot of data in the cloud and the data lakes and things like that, which is something that a traditional SOC analyst usually is not too concerned with at this point. But security engineering and so on, data analysts, data analysis in general will definitely be a really valuable skill and important in the future. But at some point, there's going to be so much happening, and the manual approach is always like the slowest one. And that's why 10 years ago, SOAR, security orchestration automation, became a big deal. And still to this day, I think it's not really been quite figured out because of the uniqueness of every environment. But a lot of automation will be happening, especially with the augmentation of AI. And then still there will be the human part that needs to eventually then decide, what's bad, what's not bad, what do we need to follow up on and what not. I've heard from people that have implemented some of the initial AI-based capabilities and co-pilots and so on. It's pretty effective in general, but if you have false positives, it takes forever to figure out the false positives, right? So it's like a pros and cons. It might be a good blessing in one side, but it might also make things a little harder on the other one. But you can see that I think it has a lot more to do in the future where, of course, you won't be responsible for building this whole thing individually, but a lot of areas, and also a lot of areas of focus of specialty skill that needs specialty skills and that you can dive into, right? You can be a data analyst, you can be more the automation expert, you can be more the detection person, you can be more the platform person. There's a lot of different opportunities too that are needed, depending on the size of the organization and so on. So a great article. It goes more into AI in this case. So let me maybe share this real quick with our Zoom audience here. Definitely worth reading up. And I think the biggest takeaway there is what they're saying is it's all going to be faster, more, better, and bigger and everything, but there's no one end-to-end solution at this point, AI augmented end-to-end solution. It's all individual problems solved really well, but it's not end-to-end, not well done end-to-end. And so it always will need a human somewhere in between, where that might change in the way of how we're doing it now and how we're going to be doing it then. But there's still going to be human parts and pieces and knowledge and skills needed. So, and how can we get there? And I like this anecdote, like in basically anything I do in my life. And so I really wanted to bring this up here too. And maybe lots of you have heard this anecdote before, but it's just like the anecdote of, the plumber that basically is fixing and charging, is fixing a problem and charging you $1,000 to just come in, figure out what to do, knock on a pipe and fix it. And when you wonder why it's so expensive, it's not really because of, the labor that goes into it for, tapping on the pipe, even though just having a plumber showing up these days is expensive. But long story short, basically the main charges, the $999 are coming from knowing where to tap based on the experience, right? Anywhere in the world, experienced people are significantly more expensive than not experienced people. But in our case, you can't solve the problem with just throwing more bodies on it, right? It's the true value, as you can see here, I think doesn't lie in the action taken, but in the knowledge and expertise that is required to know what to take action on. So if you have, same thing as a security breach, it doesn't help you to throw 10 junior analysts on an advanced investigation. It's probably easier to have one experienced person that knows exactly what to do, because then you're more effective, more efficient. But of course, these people are hard to find, so we need to focus on upskilling and training and with as realistic environments and data as possible. But what I've seen, for example, in my past experience, when we've had ransomware case over ransomware case, and it was just a matter of which ransomware group are we going to be dealing with tomorrow. I've seen people that literally just look into a very specific log and just see payloads, and even encrypted or encoded payloads. The first few bytes they saw, and they already knew what framework this was coming from, and also which threat actor we're going to be dealing with and what we're going to do from now on. So just by reading like a few bytes of encrypted or encoded code or payloads. And that's literally, the kind of probably the top level of experience that you can gain because it's really helpful. So experience, right? How can we get experience? Now, we need to understand, and this is the main thing, I think, right? People are mostly being trained up on tools. And that makes sense because that's all you have in your environment. But you don't know what you don't know. But I definitely want to challenge you to think about it as in terms of who are we up against and what do we need to defend against, instead of throwing tools and becoming experts on certain tools and throwing tools at the problem. What we need to be facing is every organization has a different risk profile, but generally it's like, typical ransomware attack TTPs. You have initial access, and almost probably all of you are familiar with what you have to do to fight the good fight every day. You basically try to get them to try to prevent them to get foothold into the environment, such as through phishing attacks, vulnerabilities, misconfiguration, exploitations, things along those lines. So this is what you're probably focusing on 90% of the time. But what we need to be able to detect and respond to is when something happens is the very typical, and this is just a generic kind of ransomware process, but it's just the steps, to be familiar with the steps and know how we can have visibility into those, how can we detect those, and how can we respond quickly to those. And this is the same steps in many ransomware scenarios, sometimes different tools, but overall it's the same techniques, right? You see persistence, and how does it happen in a Windows environment? Basically 99% of the time it's scheduled tasks or run keys or some link files somewhere, some hidden accounts created. From there, the ransomware attackers need to move laterally, figure out the environment, figure out the targets. There's a lot of commands that they need to run probably to scan the environment with utilities that are provided through CMD, WMIC, PowerShell, all kinds of tools. They're not just speaking of living off the land tools here. This is where you see a lot of manual work. At some point, we need to understand how credential and authentication works, because there will be credentials stolen, credentials accessed, privileges escalated in order to move laterally and to access resources that they shouldn't. And to do so, they try to be stealthy. So there's a lot of ways of how to evade security controls. Nowadays, with EDR and everything, getting a little harder, but absolutely possible. Every day, people are posting about new ways how to disable security controls in the worst part. But sometimes process injections, the all hijacking, understanding of that, and knowing actually, would you be able to detect that is already a first step. Discovery, domain environments, the same tools you see over and over again in ransomware cases is using DFIR for scanning the domain, or for querying the LDAP and the domain environment, getting the users, the computers, the policies, and everything. Or PowerSploit, a very common used tool as well. And then obviously, what attackers typically are using is command and control frameworks to carry out the attack. And the top ones you see everywhere is Cobalt Strike, of course, but then there's also a lot of Empire, Sliver, Mythic, and things that are coming up or have been there and are coming back up again. But it's the same process there, right? You need to understand how networking works and how command and control works, because that's the most likely giveaway if something is going on, right? You have constant communication between a victim and a server. So here's a lot to learn, especially when there's command and control traffic that might be disguised as like DNS traffic or things like that, not just as clear as HTTP, for example. So a lot to understand and a lot to think about in terms of would we be able to detect and understand that. But I've phased out like a separate category for impact, because for ransomware, I mean, you never want to just detect ransomware at this point, because then it's kind of too late. But when it comes to data exfiltration, in my experience, 90% of the time, what you see is the same process of, well, we stage the data somewhere, we put it in an archive with 7-zip, we use rclone to copy it out to the mega.nc file storage platform, which is like an anonymous kind of platform that you can use to upload all kinds of good and bad data stuff. And number one, probably being used in ransomware cases all the time. If you just detect for rclone and mega.nc, you are pretty much like, would have avoided a lot of data exfiltration incidents in the past. And then impact depends on the ransomware, right? As we know, ransomware is something that can be spread through different types of tools or utilities. Can also just be some advanced ransomware that has even data exfiltration capabilities within and spreading across the environment. It also depends on the level of access, the privileges, the accounts that they're using to run it. So that's more like a administrative kind of thought on how to prevent that part, right? But ideally, we're not going to get there. But that's the problem to understand. Just that's basically the kind of idea, the problem we want to understand and then come up with solutions. Not because we want to throw up a few tools that are commonly used in SOCs, just because we want to detect this, prevent this, and then think about solutions such as tools, people, processes that we need. And so what does it need, and what does it mean when we break it down into some of the areas that we need to be knowledgeable about? In the fundamentals part, of course, initially, if you don't understand Active Directory domain services and environments, that's a beginning step, right? In enterprise environments, if you don't understand domain controllers, domain accounts, domain admin accounts, and things that you can do with that, that's a must know in the beginning. Group policies are often abused by attackers as well. And then all kinds of enterprise tooling that is going on there. Their familiarity with that, because you can't investigate an environment if you don't even understand the tools that are normal, that are, what they're supposed to look like in order to see what does like malicious stuff look like. And then Windows system internals. Mostly if you have Windows-based environments, Windows endpoints are being abused and compromised. And in terms of, there's going to be persistence and previous escalation and credential access and all these kinds of things. And there's only a few ways, there's a lot of ways, but there's only a few ways that you commonly see this being done. So understanding Windows, talking about forensics, kind of diving deeper into understanding the internals about it, especially when it comes to user and user kernel mode applications versus the low level stuff that, for example, is being used by malware, but actually mostly time by the EDR to get to hook those APIs to monitor what's going on those systems. What does an EDR tell us then? What's going on a system when an EDR is saying that there's some malicious kind of activity on a system based on API calls observed and things along those lines. Kernel mode kind of access that malware is trying to get to attackers. And then attack TTPs, right? This is where going back to what we just talked about. Common attack TTPs. Of course, you can't know all of them, but especially if you are familiar with some of those, or can even like simulate some of those with your own Empire setup, that's even better, because you better learn by understanding what an attacker needs to do. But then when you have the basics around and figured out, we are down to, okay, now let's focus, specialize more. Let's specialize on how do we triage those events? How can we analyze those logs? How, very importantly, what do we need to know when it comes to data acquisition? then performing forensic analysis on Linux, on Mac, on Windows systems, whatever is, applicable to your environment. Dissecting malware. Now, malware is not something that, specialists are, there's a lot you can learn there, but just extracting information and understanding what it's doing is not so hard. So this is something you can definitely skill up on. Analyzing traffic, network traffic, something that every organization should be able to do, but it's just the more becoming a focus area now with NDR services and things along those lines. And then cloud environments, there's of course a lot that runs there. And only then you might think about, okay, now we have our skills and our knowledge down. Let's look about the big picture of, well, how can we improve our enterprise incident response? How can we implement threat intel and threat hunting? How can we operate red team attack scenarios, things along those lines? So this is what I would break it down to, like fundamentals, specialty skills, and then some advanced kind of capabilities that we want to be focusing on. And it all starts and ends with the people. We always, in our area, always try to improve in people, process, and technologies, but none of the technology or processes part are being improved without the people. So the people are the ones that are responsible for maximizing the technology, that are streamlining processes, improving them, and also responsible for honing their own skills to become better, to stay up to date with the current and latest threats. So it all starts and ends with the people, in my opinion, and that's why I'm focusing and really have specialized on training, because that's what I've learned. I can't fight the good fight by myself all the time, over and over again. I can only do so many ransomware cases if needed, but really when it comes down to scaling and for preventing people to burn out. I just this week saw an interesting post about people complaining how burned out they are in this area, in our industry, mostly experienced people. Well, their solution is there's a lot of people, a whole new generation that's trying to break into this area, but we need to figure out how to quickly, effectively get them up to speed to take off some of our load. Initially, it might be a little bit more work, but at some point, it's going to pay off. And so a training process is really, really important. Now, how can we learn? You might have seen this before if you have attended any of my webinars or sessions before. There's this training, the training pyramid that basically tells us if you just listen and read, right now, hopefully there's more than just 5 or 10% of knowledge retention that is going to happen here. But this is more just a awareness creation session. But really, when it comes to upskilling, then you need to be hands-on, right? The more you go down this pyramid, you can see 75% of knowledge retention happens when you're practicing, 90% when you're teaching. This is my experience, 100% true. But if you just get your hands on something, this is going to stick because you find out more problems about how does it work, why does it work, why does it not work certain ways. There's a lot of things that you can think about it here. And specifically, I would say, first you need to educate yourself in terms of what you need to know or your team. Then you plan environments, labs, you test, you train, you get better, you practice with hands-on learning. You get more hands-on to more realistic exercises or environments, and then and that helps with real world experience. And then you'll automatically figure out kind of this is what senior people do, right? You kind of have an understanding of what do you need next, or you have a vision of where you should be with your team or yourself. And broken that down into kind of the areas, the focus areas. This basically means you learn. You get knowledge, you gain knowledge and skills for practicing them. You implement your skill, you implement the knowledge you've learned by practicing in environments with data sets and skills. And then at some point, if you're pretty mature, you assess, right? You kind of understand, hey, is this enough what we do? Where can we improve? We need some more advanced training or assessments such as simulations going to make sure that we are not missing anything and figure out what we can do better. People, processes, technologies, in all these areas. And so in the beginning, when I started Blue Cape Security, I came up with this roadmap. And this is what people are still seeing and getting when I'm working with them on the coaching side of things. And this is something I've been doing individually with people as well as in teams. And this is the version 1. This is basically where everything started before we had a platform, before we had courses, before we had anything on demand really out there. It started with me building this roadmap that was basically implementing what I was just talking about, right? You build the foundations. You need to look into the Windows enterprise environments, understand how to set up a lab. First of all, that already is a lot that people have learned when it comes to configuring domain controllers and stuff. Everybody should have done that at least at some point. Living off the land attacks, and then authentication attacks, understanding NTLM authentication, Kerberos authentication, how to use Mimikatz, just the basic stuff to really see, okay, this is what are tokens, what are different times, how can token stealing happening, what are sessions, all this kind of stuff that attackers are malware sometimes is using in order to access credentials and move laterally, for example. Another area is looking into Windows internals, like I was saying before, understanding how persistence work, execution, process injections, things along those lines, analyzing scheduled tasks. And then from there, forensic skills, where you dive deep into understanding what data collection means and what you need to collect in order to be able to perform analysis on memory, on disks, on logs, advanced techniques, how to be fast, more effective, same with malware. And then with all this kind of, in your mind and in your head and practiced in your lab, you can then switch gears and look more into like, how can we do this, apply this in a enterprise environment, simulating an enterprise environment in a lab, adding some SIM tools and Velociraptor or EDR tools in order to attack the environment and then perform a ransomware simulation attack and then respond and investigate it, figuring out all the things you've learned before, figuring out step by step what you see, how can you see that, how can you analyze this. And then we talk about more the advanced topics that probably less automated, but something that is more individually based on the organizations and your level of skill and knowledge at this point dependent, which is, okay, how could we do this with APTs? Also, how can we operationalize threat intel and threat hunting? How can we do this in the cloud if it happens? And then also, how can we improve our entire IR response management, our standards, processes, our training program, effective kind of assessing and exercising, onboarding people, things along those lines. So this is the entire roadmap, basically. And I still do this coaching part out there, so you can find out about it. I'll share links later. But the whole point is this was the roadmap. And now a lot of these areas have been implemented into on-demand courses even, because I can only repeat myself so many times, but on-demand is easier, right? So foundations you can find in the one-on-one course. Digital forensics you can find in the 201 practical Windows forensics course. An enterprise incident response, like investigating a ransomware scenario, is basically now a 301 enterprise DFIR course out there now. And for everything more, then we probably want to talk about those topics as well, especially when it comes to teams or organizations. But this is where it started. And so now the new updates that I wanted to show is a adapted way of how we came up with what you need and how can we make people successful. And this is broken up into, first of all, we start with a maturity model where you can see, are you more in the crawl? Are you more in the walk and the run phase? You can see crawl is basically all about learning. Walk, as we've seen before, this is the practice part. Assess, the run part is more the assess part where you're already like pretty mature. First you master the basics, then you extend and implement capabilities, and then you maximize them. And so this is hopefully and has helped actually a lot of teams that I've worked with as well as individuals to understand where we are, how can we go from there. Now, here's a few examples. Here's a few ways of how you can identify where you're at and also what to do. Now, with current state and the basics, right, all you can do is basically learning, right? Learning skills, knowledge to overcome like those siloed operations that you might just be doing one thing over and over again. You're not even utilizing your tools well, too much data, lack of experience, skills and process gaps. All you can do there is awareness training, going through courses, getting some hands-on things, becoming more familiar with tools that might be new or not, but just knowing how to solve certain problems and starting thinking about developing some fundamental processes and potentially assessing skills to see, are we ready to move on or not? Now, with the extended capabilities, what comes out of this is where you actually more like implementing this, right? Where you're more like, hey, I have become better with tools. We can maximize the usage of the tools that we have at this point. We are implementing processes that we've been lacking at before. In our case, in my experience, the biggest process that people have started implementing after we have been working and training together was data collection. because that's the most critical part to me all the time. If we need to analyze something, we need actually data to analyze. And if you mess up data collection, you don't have anything to analyze. So that's why process implementation, critical processes, figuring out how to do this. Team that I've been working with has implemented Velociraptor everywhere as needed to just be quick and have quick and easy ways of collecting data from endpoints. That was pretty impressive. And then you also have a better awareness of the skills you actually need. You can also better identify the processes that are still having gaps that you need to improve on. But you're adopting those processes, you're starting to adopt technology, new technology or existing technology, and improve from there. You refine those processes, you enhance your skills and knowledge, and you better understand what to learn and also how to better collaborate, right? You better understand what the roles and responsibilities are of you, your team members, and you're going to be more effective. And then if you all the way there, this is where you can then maximize capabilities, right? You have more mature processes, you have a high tool proficiency, you have the tools that you're using at a pretty advanced level, you have the skills that it needs, and you continuously just improve, right? You have effective collaboration with people, and the processes and the technology is continuously improving. And this is a point where you can then test, assess, right? You can say, are we good enough in certain areas? You can perform advanced threat simulations, such as cyber range environments, where your team goes in and practices against detecting, analyzing advanced threats. You basically adapt new technology or integrate more technology, something that you're ready for, right? And you just have better knowledge sharing overall, collaborating with people. You have documentation, you have onboarding processes, everything kind of figured out. So let me know if anyone has thoughts on this or questions anytime. I have actually forgotten to look into Q&A. So let me know if you have any questions or comments. Happy to look into this. Hopefully that makes sense. This is literally all based on the experience I've gained with people and with organizations in the past here. And so this is how I've been implementing things, which you can see here. Now the training roadmap that came out of this was, you've seen the version 1 before. Now we're getting a little bit more advanced where we can actually better categorize, say, hey, okay, if you're in the crawl phase, there's courses, there's workshop, there's also coaching, mentoring. Just make sure to do the basics, to learn the basics and get the exercise going. And this is also actually for, I would say, senior people, because there's a lot of gaps that they need to fill sometimes. They might be experienced in some areas, haven't had a chance to look into other things so much, or fundamentals even. So I've actually done this with a lot of experienced people as well. But that's where you can take those courses and those workshops, and where I said before, we have on-demand training as well. And this is the reason why I put this out there, because I wanted to make sure that this is all covered in enabling people to learn what they need to learn in order to start from there. Supplemented with coaching and consulting, of course, consulting with organizations. I've done that before, develop individual training plans. The whole scope of that is basically we work together for 3 months or so throughout this training program, throughout the course, and some of the topics that are relevant to you, to help you implement that, right? Be faster. And I have some people that might actually, I think, even be on the call here that I've been working with that are really great at, hey, this is information, this is awesome, they learn about it, and then they actually start implementing it in their own environment and see what happens. And then a week later, we talk again about it. So this is the most satisfying kind of part, I think, of this, by way of doing this. But of course, some other organizations have already moved on from there, right? They've taken this, and then they already have started to implement that, like I was saying before, those processes that are important, some new tooling that are interesting, looking at more real world case studies and more practice labs. They actually build sandboxes, virtual labs to train, attack, and defend those. And that might actually then get you ready to the maximize capabilities section, right? Where you assess, where you have readiness, where your team can actually then be thrown into a case, into a simulated environment, and you do a cyber range exercise where you have advanced simulations. And the goal for that is that those analysts that are pretty eager now to learn things are still just seeing the same things over and over and over again every day, right? So the idea is, hey, every once in a while you want to throw something fun in there, or something challenging, or something malicious, because you can't just look at non-malicious stuff all the time. So you need to stay sharp, also with the latest and greatest. So we do continuous training starting next year. We already have a cyber range going now. And starting next year, we have an organization working with the organization now to have them come in every quarter or every few quarters to have a simulation exercise over a week or so that they can use in order to, upskill and keep the skills sharp, to just see what is, what an attack actually looks like and what they need to do and need to know and how they can improve the processes and procedures on that. So that might also lead to testing new technology. So this is, step by step, in my experience, a great way to improve capabilities on an organization as well as individuals. And these are some of the solutions out there. Now, talking about the specific example that I've kept mentioning before with one of the clients or the team that I've been working with is where it's like a SOC team that is mostly, when we started talking, was mostly unaware of the skills and capabilities that are needed to identify, analyze, and respond to attacks. But their CISO was pretty eager on trusting people and just making sure that if they get enough training, they will figure this out. And this was great. So main concern was ransomware. So what we did was we started with the whole coaching program, as you saw before, went from start to finish with education every week. We practiced, they had homeworks, they had labs, they had all the tools that they could figure out. And then they understood, slowly starting understanding, hey, these are processes we need. We don't have those. So then they started to implement those processes in the walk phase. They had a mental shift where they were like, oh, actually, I never thought I would need this skill or would need to do digital forensics analysis, but they did. They started to focus and they specialized. Now they have a team that specializes in different roles and responsibilities with implementing new tools, such as for data collection, which was amazing. And then from there now, they have also been looking into, of course, more advanced tools to implement those as well. But what they do is, again, seeing the same things over again. And in order to see advanced stuff and to learn from there, we're now planning this cyber range scenarios, advanced threat simulations, continuous training, constantly to just keep making sure they're getting something fun out of it, as well as learning the latest and greatest techniques from there. So this is the idea of where this should go. And this was like a prime example that I was really happy to work with them. That's the background base, or that's the feedback that we got from this. So this is basically from the deputy CISO, my main point of contact over there. They were pretty happy, as you can see here, with the training, that when they were looking for IR team training, the content was extensive and covered all the topics they needed, and the approach was hands-on. It was much more fun than just lectures. And they now learned about a ton of tools, and they have an extensive toolbox for conducting those investigations that they needed. And so, yeah, they were pretty happy overall. This is literally the feedback we got after training, and now we're working about advanced solutions. And overall, this is the most important part to take away. What you get out of this is if you focus on the people, you have happy, challenged, motivated, and engaged employees. And the ones that don't, they're the ones that you don't technically need anyways, right? Because you want to make sure people are motivated, but you need to give them something, a reason to keep them challenged, to keep them motivated, happy, and challenge them. And so what you can get with a training roadmap is also what I've learned from my experience as being a manager. People need goals. So if you're in a SOC environment and looking at the same things over and over again, there is not much you can get there, but you need to find ways of how you can engage them. So for example, what happens in this case is you have managers that actually have a structured approach, a clear roadmap for their teams to help them to develop skills and to reach goals and have enhanced team growth. And at the end of the day, you can kind of assess and evaluate them, right? When it comes to those like talks with the team members at the end of the year and assess them, like the performance reviews, then they basically have something to go off on, right? You have, hey, this is what we need for this year, this is what we need for next year, this is how you're done, this is what we have in plan in our minds. So this is something that is great for the managers to have a structured approach, and also for the people to know what to do, and also have guide rails to like where to get to with this. And they learn faster, they adapt quicker, and they're more effective and feel supported and engaged. And overall, what we all here for is that the organization benefits from it, right? And overall, you will have a more resilient and mature organization. And of course, with people that are starting this process. Now, that was overall the presentation on how to define your upskilling roadmap based on the experience we have and the offer we have out there as well. Let me know, of course, if you have any questions. We have of course, our Discord out there. We have any social media that you can follow, of course, LinkedIn. Yeah, if you need anything, let me copy this because I've actually provided something here too. Anyone who is interested you can find everything on the website, of course. But if you're interested, then please reach out to this link here. Let's see if I can actually share this over here too. Yep. So please reach out to this link if you're interested in the more like the walk and the run phases. We have updates coming up. I just want to see, or really curious to see if people are ready for it because of the things that we're doing right now. If you sign up there, just make sure to say which part you're interested in or both. And I'm happy to see that and also reach out if needed, because again, I'm happy to collaborate with people, to work with people on any of those solutions. Now, another thing I have mentioned, the trainings. You can, of course, find the trainings, and you can also find, of course, the workshops and the coaching parts on the website. So here's also, of course, the links that I forgot to share earlier. But yeah, any questions, let me know. If there's anyone in the chat, I don't know if we have Q&A. There it is. But let me know. Other than that, I really appreciate everybody showing up and seeing so many familiar names. That's awesome, guys. Thank you. All right. Yeah, so the live training part is, if you go to live training site, you can see I have a number of workshops coming up in conferences. If you want to go to live conferences somewhere in the United States for the next 2 months, there is a bunch of them where I do ransomware training. There might be one in Europe later this year, next year. And also there is, on demand, or if you just basically have an organization to do individual trainings, then of course, happy to talk about it. It's something you can find there as well as, of course, the on-demand courses that most of you are probably now familiar with, and feel free to check them out. We have the Enterprise DFIR course still in early bird because it's in development, but already accessible, the first few modules. So if you get in there before we finish the course, which is going to be in a few weeks, then you get the early pricing for that as well. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Check it out and let me know. But thanks everyone for joining. That is all I wanted to share with you. Feel free to reach out. Hey Rob, thanks. Thanks for joining, David. And I talk to you next time. Thanks. Oh, thanks guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining. Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.